Hey, my name is Dylan Chen, and today I'm going to be talking about pregnancy-related complications for my final video presentation. So specifically, I'm going to be talking about maternal death inside of this presentation. So according to the ICD-10, maternal death is just any death of a pregnant woman or woman within 42 days after end of pregnancy from pregnancy-related causes, not including accidental deaths that aren't related to pregnancy. So this picture shows a history of the maternal mortality ratio, or the MMR, from the 1750s to 2020. So basically, as medical technology increased, the maternal mortality ratio decreased over time, but obviously this is still an issue that we want to try and fix. So that's why there's studies and research about it. So here are some of the statistics about the MMR. So the World Health Organization said there are around 300,000 deaths in 2017 from maternal death, which is a lot of deaths. And this is also an issue because it threatens the health of the unborn child. Because studies have shown that, like, if the mother suffers from pregnancy-related complications, these can threaten the health of the child. Another thing that makes this important is that a lot of these pregnancy-related complications are treatable. They just aren't preventable or like predictable. So it's very important to examine the times between the onset of the complication and treatment or death, because if we can look at what happens between then, we can try and mitigate maternal mortality. So here's a map showing where and which areas are more affected by maternal mortality. So clearly, like areas like Africa, South America, and South Asia are disproportionately affected by maternal mortality. And also lower income countries are disproportionately affected. So one example of this is that in wealthier countries, the maternal mortality ratio was around 11 per 100,000 live births in 2017, and comparing this to lower income countries, which was around 450 per 100,000, which is a large difference. So we're going to look at a study called Maternal Mortality in Ifakar Health and Demographic Surveillance System, Spatial Patterns, Trends, and Risk Factors 2006 to 2010. This is a study that was written by Alfred Manier, Rose Nathan, and Nelson Gill, and it is based off the Ifakar Health and Demographic Surveillance System, or IHDSS, which is just a system that got informed consent from participants inside of Tanzania to like take their health information and try and do research on it. This study was published in a science journal called PLOS One, which just publishes peer-reviewed articles about science and medicine. So next we're going to look at the study objectives of this study. So there's very little data on maternal mortality, and there's like a research scarcity. So this study aims to use Tanzania's information system to provide unique data about maternal death and try and help reduce the MMR in Tanzania by like providing solutions and information about it. So some of the factors that were examined in this study include age, socioeconomic status, and education. We'll look into more of them later. Some of these fit into this human ecology triangle pretty easily. So one example is education, which can fit in just in general into the behavior triangle. The distance between homes and hospitals can fit pretty easily into the built triangle of the habitat. And also the delivery place that the baby was delivered in could fit somewhat into social or behavioral. And clearly, like the age of the mother would fit into the population triangle at age. So this study was a case control study because it examines and compares variables that victims of maternal deaths were exposed to and compares them to the variables that women who had normal pregnancies were exposed to. The data was collected inside Ifakara, which is a area in Tanzania, as stated before, and it was collected using the IHDSS. Some other information was collected using ArcGIS, including like the distance between women's homes and hospitals. And they also used the ArcGIS to take data from like just places on the map to see how far away those places were from like every single case of maternal death, to try and figure out which areas inside of Ifakara have more higher rates of maternal death than others. So data was collected from around 37,000 women of childbearing age, or like 15 to 45 in this study. And inside of this, from 2006 to 2010, there were around 14,000 pregnant women, and there were around 77 cases of maternal death over those 4 years. So this shows one of the maps that the ArcGIS was used to create, and the green diamonds here are health facilities, and these roads are the purple lines. So clearly we can see here the green areas are areas where less maternal mortality exists. And these red areas, or sorry, this is a map that shows just broad causes of death. So these green areas just show where less women of childbearing age die. And these red areas are hot spots where more people die. And then here we will look at a map of direct maternal causes of death. So here you can see this area is a hot spot of like maternal death, and so is this area. And on our next slide, we can compare these two, and we can make like some assumptions based on these maps. So like one example is if you look in the top right corner of each of these maps, clearly there is less maternal death compared to how much just like death in general there is in this area. So you could assume maybe that, oh, this area just has like really good obstetric emergency care. So like there's pregnant mothers are less likely to die in this area or something like that. Or there's other factors that are more common in this area that would decrease the rate of maternal death. And you can also see like stuff like this over here. So obviously these huge differences are kind of concerning within the maps. So that is why more research might be needed on this topic, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So now we're going to look at some charts just showing some of the factors that were researched. So clearly, you can see that like there are a lot of significant things in here, and one of the most significant here is socioeconomic status. So this clearly shows that as someone is wealthier, they're less likely to suffer from maternal death. This might be because like maybe they have more access to healthcare, or they have access to better food and more options than someone who's less wealthy. Some other factors that I'd like to look at are distance from a woman's home to healthcare facilities. So this one shows that women are just as likely to die when they're closer to a hospital compared to far away in this area. And I think this is interesting because other studies that I've looked at show different results where if like a woman is farther away, they're more likely to suffer from maternal death. Whereas instead of if a car from 2006 to 2010, pregnant women are about equally as likely to die. So this might show like suggest some things about like the healthcare system. Maybe the hospitals aren't very effective, or maybe other like outside resources are effective inside of this area. And this chart shows univariable linear regression. So it basically just takes into account just that variable and how it interacts with maternal death or just that exposure. So some other non-significant ones were education and occupation, and another very significant one was marital status. So this shows that compared to single women, married women are less likely, 20 times less likely to suffer from maternal death, and divorced/separated or widowed women are over 5 times more likely to suffer from it compared to single women. So we can also see here that the conditions of the delivery also affect maternal death. So here it shows that the assistant at delivery and the delivery place can affect it. So now we can look at multivariable linear regression of these factors, and most of them stay the same except for delivery place shows that outside the health facility, it actually decreases likelihood of maternal death, which was not shown inside of the previous table. So this may be a limitation or like a limitation of the study because it's just giving confounding things because the other table said gave other data. So here we have our conclusions. So in conclusion, clearly socioeconomic status affects the likelihood of maternal mortality. And this study also strangely shows that distance from hospital doesn't affect it, which is as I said earlier, which is contradictory to some other studies. The study also shows that age affects maternal mortality, and part of this might be as a result of like social stigma. So, for example, like a younger woman, like a teenager, might not go to the hospital as often as an older woman because they're worried about like social stigma or getting judged. So they might be more likely to suffer from death. And although maternal mortality is decreasing like over the years, there's still distinguishable geographic differences even across this small area. And since many mothers died near the hospitals, this questions the accessibility and level of available obstetric care in these areas. Although this study provides some insight on associations between exposures and maternal mortality, such as lower age, increasing risk, This study also raises questions on how the MMR can be mitigated in Tanzania. So clearly some more research is needed to figure out like what is causing these discrepancies. Some limitations of this include the use of verbal autopsies. So although these are said in other studies to be to be good sources, they can still suffer from human error. The sample size of this is also a limitation because we're using the IHDSS inside of this study. Obviously, it's limited to areas that are inside of Ifakara, so the sample size is going to be smaller than if it was bigger. And here are my references.